Welcome, everybody, to Roadmap to Joy. I'm just so pleased that we've got a special hour we get to spend together with Kevin Warren is with us. And early on my career, and we started way back when, in 2007, started treating a wonderful population of kids that actually had adoption, and I like to call it relinquishment histories. And so Kevin, we'll let him introduce himself, but we're going to get to take an amazing journey today and share some of your story. So Kevin, maybe introduce yourself. And
Yeah, I'm super excited to be on the podcast and have this opportunity to share my story. I'm very passionate about adoption and excited to share. I currently work at Embark. One of the things that drew me to Embark was actually the past experience that you guys have had treating adoption back at Kalo. And so I'm really excited to be here, and I think we're going to have a lot of good things to talk about.
Yeah, I'm excited, Kevin, because I know we worked together for a while, and then until we heard somebody else's story who I had worked with for a while, and then you had said, Rob, I'm actually adopted.
Yeah.
And we had worked together for a little while,
Right,
and I was
right.
like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Kevin, this is wonderful.
Totally.
Let's talk about this. And
Yeah.
so we've gotten to share a lot about that. And so if you wouldn't mind, you were willing and actually eager to be able to share. And what are some of your hopes and goals for this time for the listener?
For sure. Before today, I was trying to think, what are some things, if as I was a kid or even if I were a parent, what are some things that I would really feel like I want to hear from somebody who's been adopted, and then also from an expert in the field. And so I love for adoptees to feel heard, understood, and that they would feel like not alone. And then I also like for the population of parents who are adoptive parents, or even thinking of being parents who adopt, for them to know kind of what it's like for adopted kids to go through, and just to hear firsthand experience. I feel like that's really important for parents to understand, like what somebody's gone through and what somebody's experienced. And for me, it's been a very hard but also very beautiful journey. So I really just hope that that's what people get out of it.
I love that, Kevin. So, well, if you don't mind, let's climb in. So
Yeah.
if you wouldn't mind starting at the beginning and share a little bit of your story.
For sure. So I was adopted at almost 2 years old. I was born in Salem, Oregon, and my biological mother, I'll refer to them as biological parents, and my mom and dad as my adoptive parents. So my biological parents, I believe that it was more of just a one-night stand type of situation, so they didn't have a relationship. Now I know, and so I was born in a hospital after my biological mother got out of prison to give birth to me, and so she was in prison during her pregnancy with me, and was struggling through a lot of substance use and during that time, prior to being in prison. And so I'm thankful because she was not able to be on drugs while she was pregnant with me. So that's actually like a beautiful thing, and unfortunately not something that that all adoptees have the privilege of experiencing. But
being incarcerated probably kept her
Right.
sober, and
Yeah.
you as the infant and
Yep.
the fetus in a healthy way.
Totally. So I'm very thankful for that. Yeah. And so I was living after I was born. I guess there was a whole thing with her bringing a couple of people that she thought might have been the biological father to the hospital to see me. And there was, I guess, a couple of confusions of, oh, you might be the father. I don't think you are the father. It must be this other person. And we'll get into that later. But they had multiple people, and no shame to her at all. She's actually I'll get into this, but she's had a beautiful redemption story of just wholeness, and she's been sober for so long and is an incredible person. But at that time she was going through a lot of struggles. And so Yeah, I ended up living with a relative of hers. I was physically abused, and both of my legs were broken when I was in that place. And I don't know who it is, and I'm not sure if she does. But I was put into a hospital around the age of a year and a half, into a hospital that specializes in abused infants. And they found that both of my legs were broken and that it probably was not an accident. Of course, I don't remember any of that, but I'm sure it's affected something somehow. And so I actually didn't know that until I started searching for my biological mother and father through medical records, and I saw that, and it was pretty crazy to see. But anyways, and so after that point was when they put me up for adoption, and it was a closed adoption. And so my parents, my mom and dad, my adoptive parents, did not know my biological mother or father when they adopted me. They were living in Oregon at the time, so I lived in Salem for probably about a year after I was adopted. And then my adoptive parents and I moved to Sacramento, California. They adopted about probably 5, 6 years later. They adopted two separate siblings, not related to me, but related to each other from a foster home. And we only actually were able to keep and fully legally adopt the sister of the two because the brother was physically abusive to my sister, who's not biologically related, but I grew up with. And before the adoption was final, the adoption agency actually suggested that we put him in a home that is better fit for his needs. And I'm not sure exactly what those were, but I found out he went into the military and he's living a enjoyable life, so that's good. But
So let me go back for
please.
a second, Kevin.
Yep. I know there's a lot.
So much
Yeah.
wonderful information. So was your biological mother at the time,
Mm-hmm.
I know now that you look back, was she prepared to give you up for adoption, or you just went to this family temporarily, or do you know?
No, that's a good question. So, well, I've gotten in touch with them, and so from what I know is she I don't think she wanted to give me up for adoption, and I think that I was put in with her friend or family member temporarily in hopes that I would be reunited with her after she was out of prison.
And then, so walk us through. So, how did you go from those people,
Mm-hmm.
and did you go into social services, or how were you adopted?
Yes. So I was actually put with a grandfather and a grandmother who actually specialize in like being like the host, the family host for like toddlers and infants that are going to be adopted. And so I'm not sure exactly what the name of it is, but it's what they did for like their life is they just like had babies and like kept them at their home until the adoption service found a family for them. So I was with those individuals for, I think, probably close to a year, maybe. I'm not sure. But I know when I was injured, I was really, really young, and I was adopted at 2, so it must have probably been a year.
Was finding out about the injury, was that the triggering mechanism to have you go to these people?
Oh, yes, it was. So when the hospital, like when I was taken to the hospital, I'm pretty sure what happened is the hospital called and reported it, and that's why it then became a very closed-off adoption. My biological mother was not able to get in touch with me, and all of that. It just completely,
As well as from the people who had you.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So even infant Kevin has experienced a tremendous amount of trauma.
Yeah.
At that point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you go live with these people, and then you're in the system available for adoption,
Mm-hmm.
and then your parents find you.
Yep.
And how was there any special way that they found you other than living in the same state, or?
I don't know. I know that my mom was not able to have kids, and or my dad, we're not sure, but they tried tried for a long time, and so they basically just decided they wanted to adopt and told the adoption agency, we are, open for anyone. Like we just want a child. And I happen to be that child. My family, I actually was given to my parents on my dad's birthday. So it's kind of a random fun fact, but yeah, they just wanted to adopt. And so then they got a call one day and said, we have a baby boy who needs a home. And so there you go.
And remind me how old you were the day of your adoption.
The day of my adoption, I was around 2.
Around 2.
Yeah.
So 2 years is quite a bit of time to be.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I've never really thought of it that way, to be honest, because I've been like, 2 is so young. Like, nobody remembers anything from 2. But, going through the therapy and the, even just reading up on things and hearing other people's story, like, there's a lot packed into those 2 years that can affect the rest of your life. And, a journey of healing is a lifelong thing. So, yeah.
It's so significant. So I love that we're talking about this.
Me too.
How many people do feel like, it was only 2.
Right.
I think it was so quick. But yet, those 2 years are so formative. This is why I'm just sort of amazed that going through broken legs, and you can imagine, I don't know that you're getting the most nurturing care when you're with those people experiencing that. So even little Kevin is starting off in the world, and then that these people adopt you. Right. Your parents. And then, so catch us up. So they adopt more children, so you have siblings.
Correct.
And then, so tell me about your siblings again.
Yeah. So it ended up just being one that I grew up with. And so my sister, they adopted her and her biological brother, unrelated to me. Oh, okay. But, and that's when he hurt my sister multiple times. And so the adoption service suggested that he go back into foster care for a little while. And so I grew up with my sister.
What's the age difference?
4 years. So she's 24, 25. I can't remember exactly how old I was when we adopted her, but I think she was close to 3, so I must have been 7.
So you'd been 5 years approximately.
Yeah.
With them, without a...
I will say I remember vividly a moment of a little bit of fear of like, what's it going to be like to have a sibling? Because I've had this experience of being the only child for 5 years or whatever, and developing this relationship, and then all of a sudden there's these 2 siblings that come into the picture that I've never met, that I never know, that I never had that moment of like holding as a baby, being that big baby brother,
when your mom's or that big pregnant, brother. You're not preparing.
Right. It was a very weird experience. Quick little side note on that. I remember us going to pick them up from the house that they were at, and we literally had a minivan, and we drive up to the home, and I remember seeing this woman walk out in tears, and my parents go in and greet her, and they walk out with my sister and would have been my brother, and they get in the car with us, and I'm sitting in the middle seats, and my sister gets put in the little seat next to me. And there were those little, it was like a Honda Odyssey or whatever, so the seats are separated, and she's got a car seat, and who would have been my brother was in the back. And I just remember the whole drive, he would just like call me like, hey you, who are you? Like, why are you here? And it was a really weird experience, honestly, it really was. The whole ride, he just wanted to know like why we were doing this. And so it was just like, wow, and I wanted to be like a brother, but I'm only 7, and I'm like, what do I even do? So it was just a very odd experience, I will say.
So how long was the brother with you before they sent him? It was unsafe.
Probably not even a year.
Oh, not even a year. So it was the 3 of you, and then it goes to the 2 of you.
Correct.
And what is that relationship with your sister, if I can ask?
My sister?
Yeah.
It was always very tough. Well, first and foremost, her biological mother was on drugs when she was pregnant with her. So she had some more extensive mental struggles. And mine were anxiety and depression and isolation, and hers were anger, suicidal ideation, and she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And and had a few moments of schizophrenic episodes as well. And so that was, as you can imagine, very hard for my parents, but also very hard to navigate as a brother, because again, I wanted to be like that supportive brother and also wanted to have that relationship. And I will honestly say, to this day, it's been hard, because I look back and I think like, wow, I really wish that I had that from birth to growing up experience. Mm-hmm. I will say we don't have the closest relationship, but I really am just hoping and praying that changes, obviously, because I love her a lot. But growing up, it was a fairly close relationship, but she did end up just basically saying, I don't want to be a part of this family, and leaving. And so she got put into a rehabilitation center that treated, specialized in DBT, and that was in Houston, Texas. And she was 17 at the time, and she did not voluntarily go. My parents had some, I can't remember the name. Transporters come and take her. And my parents visited her every month, and it was very uncommon for parents to do that. She had a lot of good breakthrough and stuff there, but then unfortunately when she came back home, did not follow pretty much anything that she learned, and really started getting into some dangerous stuff again, and ultimately decided, like, well, I don't want to do these things that you're asking me to do, fairly normal things, and decided to leave. And so I think that was hard for my parents, and in some ways it was a catch-22 for me, because it was hard, but I was also, at this point, I was probably 21, and I was like, well, I mean, if this is going to be better for you, then, I mean, that's what needs to happen, because, you know, I can't have you pulling knives on my parents and stuff, so
things were really dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, I can only imagine how stressful that was on you.
Yeah.
But you talked about your parents.
Right.
Maybe if you don't mind describing your experience with your parents, and, you know, were they nurturing and loving?
Yeah.
And what was that like for you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, they were very nurturing and loving. My sister really did rock their world a little bit, and my mom coped with, I'd say probably an eating disorder, possibly, and really just completely secluding herself from the family. And my dad became a workaholic. I would say he probably would acknowledge that even today. And I mean, again, my mom and dad now, probably the last 3 years, have had an incredible healing experience, and are doing so much better. And I mean, really, I give so much love and support to my parents, because they did everything that they could, and they genuinely are awesome parents. But I mean, it was a very dark time. And I think that my family, looking back, we turned away from community, and it was movies and like sitting on the couch doing nothing, or me just being in my room. And I will say I didn't know how to have healthy friendship, and my family is learning how to have healthy friendship currently.
Well,
yeah.
Kevin, thank you. This is such an amazing story. If I could, when did you recognize or begin to understand that there was this adoption, and how did your parents create an environment around the adoption story?
I remember being maybe 8 or 9, and I'm sure they told me I was adopted before this, but this is when I remember. And my mom, I think we were having some kind of conversation, and I never ended up having the experience of being a I don't know what the technical word for it would be, but lashing out about, you're not my mom, you're not my dad. You know, I did have moments of that, but I think it showed itself in a different way than a lot of kids would. It wasn't necessarily in anger or hatred, but it was in insecurity and anxiety. And again, before I go into the story you just told me, I remember being or probably around that age, and my family had friends over, and that didn't happen very often. And I was in my bedroom, and I just needed to go to the restroom. And for some reason, I couldn't muster up the courage to get myself out of my room to walk down the hall. And I was so riddled with anxiety that for some reason I couldn't, I physically couldn't open my door.
You were frozen.
Yeah. And so I've actually thought about that over the last few years of just like, I wonder where that was rooted from, or I wonder where that came from, because that's a very abnormal experience. I really think it was anxiety, clearly. But I didn't know how to be around people very well. And so, but going back to your question, my mom told me, you're adopted, and we would love to partner with you with finding your biological family whenever you feel ready.
And was this throughout your life?
This was throughout my life. They were always very supportive, and that meant a lot to me. Deep down, I always knew I wanted it to be my own journey, but knowing that they were willing to help, I think meant a lot to me. And yeah, I remember my mom saying, your biological mother was beautiful. I've only seen pictures. But she was beautiful, and she smoked, and, and I think that was about it. So in my mind, I had put up this and this is also so strange, but I'll share it anyway, but I remember, even to this day, I remember thinking that I saw, a woman that fit in my mind who my biological mother was, being taken out of the hospital in a wheelchair, and she had blonde curly hair. And for some reason, I think that was just either a dream I had or an association I had in my head of how to have a personal relationship with my biological mother, because I never did. So I somehow created one in my mind. She doesn't have blonde curly hair, by the way, But for some reason, I created that moment in my mind, and I think it made me feel comforted.
Yeah, of course.
And so, anyways, that's a normal thing, I think. And if there's people out there that are experiencing the same thing, I also wanted to give myself grace and not looking back. I was like, oh, why am I having these thoughts, or why, is this real? Is this true? And I even brought it up to my mom and was like, is this and she's like, no, I don't know where that's coming from, but for some reason it was comforting to me. But,
I do want to say,
yeah.
In treating adoption for such a long time, it seems to be a very normative thing that I've heard.
Weird.
Lots of people say, I was convinced that I would recognize them on the street.
Wow.
And I had this vision of what they would look like, sort of like me. And, I was always kind of hyper vigilant for looking out for them. So it's I love that you shared that, because it sounds like it's somewhat of a normative thing for us to be able to create an image that we can hold on to and helps to maybe calm us a little bit.
Yeah.
There is this figure in my life. So
right.
Kevin,
that's comforting to know that that's not an abnormal thing.
No, it's I think it is quite normal, actually.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, they were always very open to supporting me, and that meant a lot.
That's incredible. So when the whole time you have this intuitive sense, I guess, that I have this adoption story.
Right.
My sister does too, but my sister's reacting much differently than me.
Right.
She's treating my parents much differently than I am. I wonder how that is growing up. You're both adopted, but I wonder if for you, how do you feel about your parents? Is there connection? Do you feel a sense of all of this, and your sister's reacting a certain way? I just wonder what that's like to have.
Right.
Two, what seems like different experiences, even though there's adoption with these same two people, what that was like for you.
Yeah, what it was like for me to experience in real time, or what it seems like now.
Well, just in real time, I wonder what it's like to be Kevin and gosh, I really care for these people, and I feel like they care about me. And here your sister is kind of really wrestling with them and doing some oppositional stuff. I wonder if that was a bit of a challenge for you too.
Yeah. No, I think it probably was. Trying to think back to what I felt and what I was experiencing. I mean, I remember any time that we would try to go on either road trips together or vacations together, it was always my parents always were extremely stressed, and they didn't necessarily want, like, they wanted to go, but they didn't want to go, if that makes sense. And it was hard for me because I knew that my mom was going to be frazzled and stressed out, and my dad was going to be just kind of a little bit distant. And I knew, I think deep down, that they were just trying to cope with how to handle my sister and me. I mean, I was far from a perfect child. I mean, and there was some normal brotherly moments where I would stir the pot a little bit and all that kind of stuff. But I think really it was really hard for me to see my sister treating my parents that way. And I think in the moment it was hard, but really when I saw the repercussions of what was happening to my mom and my dad was what was the hardest.
So talk to me, Kevin. Thank you. Tell me a little bit about how was it going to school and like in high school? Like, did people know you were adopted?
Oh my
Did they
goodness.
make assumptions about you? How was that? Was there significant events
Right.
growing up for you?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, 7th grade is awkward for all of us. And so I'd say there was, on top of just being awkward, it was also like I didn't want anyone to know that I was adopted, so I didn't share with anyone that I was adopted.
Do you look like your parents, or
I actually somewhat do. I kind of look like my dad, so that worked out in my favor.
so you could get away with it?
Right,
Yeah,
right. A lot of kids, though, don't,
Yeah,
that are
right,
adopted.
right.
So, so that must be a totally different experience for them. But either way, I didn't want people to know. And there was a sense of shame around being adopted for me. And especially when people would make jokes like, oh, he's adopted, or things like that. But they didn't know that I actually was. And for me, I was like, oh, well, ha ha ha, just kind of like thinking it's funny, but it actually was a little bit like hurtful and kind of like dug down even more of that feeling of like, oh, they can't know I'm adopted because they're going to think I'm weird. And looking back, I'm not sure why I felt that way. I'm sure there was so many reasons, but now I'm so open about it and so comfortable in who I am that it almost feels like, man, I wish I could tell little me, like, it's okay. I love you. I'm proud of you. And like, this is a part of like who you are, and it's a good thing. But I think it was just the nature of me being young and immature and just not knowing how to handle
be different.
it. Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
So, that part of you was I'm hearing you saying, I was trying to keep that a little hidden.
Right.
Even the junior high through high school?
4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and probably freshman year of high school was, I mean, freshman year, I wouldn't say that it was like me trying to hide it, but I was a little bit more comfortable. But once I started getting into like middle high school years again, and I really, even until like the past 5 years, have really been the pivotal time for me to learn what it's like to have a relationship and have close friendship, because I didn't feel like that was modeled for me in my life. And I spent a lot of my young youth just isolated. And I mean, I had a few friends for sure that were really, really close. And then I had like, the normal people at school that I'd hang out with here and there. But
this social, relational thing, you were like, my family wasn't real big on it.
Right.
So it wasn't modeled for me. So you used the term isolation before. Was there a sense of maybe withdrawal or internalizing, or I would even maybe use the term loneliness?
Yeah, I would. And I think that was primarily the biggest thing in probably junior high to freshman year was when that was the deepest. And that was just me being in my room and really intentionally isolating myself from my family.
So through later into high school, you're coming to more acceptance about your adoption story.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe when does Kevin start to really embrace this journey, and when do you start to think about a search?
My sophomore year of high school, my family started getting involved in church a little bit more, which meant there's a realistic and an actual community around you more. And so I started learning what it's like to have healthier community with people. And I ended up going to a winter camp at that church. And believe it or not, they spoke on fatherhood. And for me, that was very, very personal for me. I had, specifically, they were talking about in my faith, Christianity, it's Jesus as the Father, and so they were talking on that, and that really hit home for me, and of learning that I have a Father that I can trust in heaven, and who sees me for who I am. I deep down believe the complete restoration and healing that happened for me was around that, and I felt like I was able to have a personal relationship with God, and that was healing because I just hadn't really had much relationship, I don't know if that helps, but
yeah, did that grounding or that healing as you described it, did that help you to go on this search journey? And maybe talk about,
I'm glad you asked that question.
When did that?
Yeah. So I think like around the time of finding my faith for myself and all of that, I really wanted to know who I was in a more deep sense. I really feel like around that time was when I started developing a greater sense of it's okay for me to be creative. It's okay for me to all of the things that in my past I was so worried about people knowing too much about, or is being creative unmanly, or is this or that, or and so I really was like, okay, this is the start to my journey to figure out where I come from, and do I look like them? Am I interested in the same things? Are they creative too? Or what are they like? And I want to figure that
biological.
out. Yes, thank you for clarifying. My biological family. And then there was also just the practicals of like, well, I want to know like what medical issues do they have that I need to be aware of, and all of that. And so I remember sitting on my bed with Facebook open, and I was sitting there and I was like, I want to know who to search for, but I don't know. And so I went out.
Names or anything?
So I remember my dad telling me that medical records were in the family safe, which I had access to. And so I didn't tell my family that I was doing this, and they were okay because they told me that they would help me in the past, and they were very open about it. And I ended up bringing them into this whole experience, and it was awesome. But I remember going out there, and I was like, I'm going to find my medical records.
How old are you at this point?
20.
20, okay, yeah. Wow.
I found my medical records, and I remember seeing the name Mandy Gibbons on there, and I was like, that's a name that I don't recognize, so I'm going to search that on Facebook. And then I saw my biological mother's name on there as well, and so I searched that too. So many different results came up, and so I had drafted a little DM message, and I just copied and pasted that to everyone. Hi, my name's Kevin Warren, but my name at birth was Devin James Freeman, which is, believe it or not, true. Hopefully they'd be able to put pieces together. And about 4 months later, I get a response, and it's Mandy Gibbons. And she said, we've been looking for you our whole life, but we've been looking for the guy named Devin. And we had no idea your name was changed to Kevin. Looking back, believe it or not, they actually they suggested that my name maybe change because it was more of a hostile adoption.
Wow.
And my parents just liked the name Kevin versus Devin, I guess. I don't know. And so that was crazy to read that message. And then she put me in touch with my biological mother.
So who was that lady?
That was my half-sister.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And so she put me in touch with my biological mother, and that was a very emotional phone call.
So did you dial the number?
So she told me that this person might not be prepared to hear from you, but here's her phone number. And so I did call, and I believe that Mandy kind of called her prior and said, you might be getting this call, which I'm thankful she did. I would recommend that for anyone going through this experience.
A little front loading.
Yes. And I think that really helped. But I remember my biological mother saying, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to give you up. I didn't want you to be adopted. I wish I could give you a better life," and all of this stuff.
She said this to you?
Yeah, she said this to me. And I remember because I felt in my heart I was ready to forgive her. I'm sure for a lot of people, they need extra time to go through that. And part of me is glad that I waited until I was ready for all of that, because really, like, even though I did live a good life, there was still a part of me that was like, oh, like, why,
Yeah.
And so I was able to say, hey, I love you, I forgive you, and I'm not mad at you. And she just broke down. And
this was over the phone?
This was over the phone. And, I don't think she was able to receive it deep down in that moment, but I think it meant a lot. And so that was the first conversation I had with one of my biological family members.
And that must have been, you'll never forget that.
No.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then you said your half-sister are there. So your biological mom had other children.
She did. So she had 2 daughters, and they're both related to each other, full blood. And then I have a half-brother who is not related to them fully on the father's side. So there's multiple fathers in the picture here. And then there's me. So I have a total of 3 siblings.
Wow. So they knew about you.
They knew that I existed, but they didn't know my name.
None of them were given up for adoption.
Correct. None of them were. Yeah, my half-brother was actually in, I think it was close to like 9 or 10 foster homes in his life, because my biological mother only recently got sober.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the 2 girls,
Mm-hmm.
did they live with her?
They ended up living with their dad.
With their dad.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of a shattered home experience for all of you guys.
Yeah.
How has that been do you talk with them? And
so I keep mostly in touch with my half-brother, and he has had a very rough childhood. So with him being in multiple foster homes, there was a lot of like turbulence in his, life. Addiction to alcohol and drugs and stuff like that are definitely a part of it. I know he just actually recently admitted himself into a care facility to get help from that stuff, and so that's huge. Yeah, I went out in, can't remember what year, 2015, to meet my biological mother and to meet him, because at that time that's all who I knew, and met them and hung out with them for a little bit and just got to know them, and it was definitely weird, but it was good. Yeah.
So it's amazing, Kevin, that you were able to, many people I don't know that, especially seeing like some of the collateral damage after you were born and having siblings, to move to a place of forgiveness.
Yeah.
Really incredible, because lots of times doing your search is always very interesting for me, because in talking to people who are about to embark on their search, specifically teens, you kind of have to prepare yourself for the worst.
For sure.
And hope for the best.
Yeah.
But, I don't know what it was like for you, but I'm sure some of that I have to be prepared for. Maybe there's some rejection, or maybe I can't rekindle, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I would say I probably felt ready for that rejection. And I'm glad I waited until I was ready for that, because if I had done it when I was younger, I probably, first of all, she probably wouldn't have been in a very healthy place. But again, for me, I believe that was all like God's timing. But I think for a lot of people, it's just like, are you ready to experience the worst? Because like for me, I had come to a place where I was okay with who I was, and my identity wasn't in my adoption story anymore, that I was okay with whatever she was going to say. Like, I honestly, it would have been hurtful if she said, I don't ever want to talk to you again, but I think I would have been ready to hear it.
Because I would have been okay without that.
Right.
As I'm thinking about this, so you're 20-something years old, you're going through this, I would imagine there's a certain amount of conflict inside, because I'm grateful for the things that I have, because it could have been worse.
Right. Yeah.
And so you're grateful for that, but yet there's still there's still a lot of pain associated with
Right.
that whole situation.
Yeah, for sure. I think I've got to walk a fine line because it's like my life probably was a little bit less um, all over the place than it would have been if I wasn't adopted. But I also had my own struggles with being adopted. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really amazing. So, I mean, I met you, and you've been married, and we talk about your wife, and I'm just dying of curiosity. How has that played out in your relationships? And if you don't mind sharing that.
No, I'd love to share.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I really would say that it hasn't affected it as much as I would think, but it's very possible it affects it in ways that I'm not aware of. But when we're thinking on, areas of anxiety or overthinking things or dwelling on thoughts, I definitely, early on in our marriage, Katie and I's marriage, it was like I would come up with scenarios in my head of what could happen, or am I going to be liked, or what are they going to think of me, or did I say the right thing, or really just like self-sabotaging myself for either saying the wrong thing or sounding weird when I said it, or anything like that, to where it was like, oh, well, I'm going to like actually emotionally make myself pay for that because like that wasn't good. And it was really strange. It was almost like a way for me to learn how to be better. And that's not something necessarily that I struggle with anymore, but I'm not sure exactly where that ties into everything. But I remember Katie really helping me in through that. And I will say that first, that I don't have a codependent relationship with her in any way, and that I've gone through a ton of healing before getting married. But there is a sense of, when you marry someone, you marry them and they know all of you, and they experience the highs and the lows and the good and the bad. And so she was experiencing that in that moment, like the bad things, like all those things. And it really was a beautiful thing for me to be able to bring her into that moment. And I think there was a sense of me having to be okay with bringing her into that, of being like, I'm really struggling with my thoughts right now. And I'm really struggling with letting this go. And even to this day, that was probably 3 years ago, but to this day, there's times here and there. It's not as consistent as it was, but there's times where she says, "Hey, Kev, like you need to just let it go. Like this isn't helping anything. What you said was fine. It's not a big deal, and you need to just let it go." And I'm so thankful for that because I married somebody strong. But I think that could have been associated with feelings of abandonment or not being good enough or any of that kind of stuff, and me having to protect myself from not being good enough in some way. I don't know if that helps, but I'd say in the big picture, that's probably one of the biggest things. And I do feel like I've gotten to a place where I can have and receive affection in a greater way than I think I would have when I was younger.
You used the term early on, to be known.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're describing your wife, I'm hearing that.
Yeah.
Like, you feel truly known.
Mm-hmm.
With the thoughts, the insecurities,
right,
all of that, she knows you.
Right.
And for a lot of people, especially with relinquishment adoption histories, because we have that primal wound, that sense of, it's terrifying to let people truly know you.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, I don't know if you felt some of that. I use the term terrifying. It really is.
No, it's so terrifying.
Did you feel some of that?
Yeah, I did. I honestly think that in my first serious relationship where I was thinking about marriage, I think was a much darker time for me of like really struggling with like, am I okay with this person actually knowing me? I don't know if I am. And that was years and years ago. But I think that that's a normal thing to experience. And I really did have a fear. And it did come up when I was dating my wife, Katie. And I remember being on dates and almost feeling like I had to put on a facade a little bit And part of that could also be human. We get comfortable with people once we hang out with them more. But there was a sense of like having to put on almost like a show. But I had to get myself to a place where I was no longer okay with putting on a show, but I was okay with letting go of my need to be perfect. And just be known. It really was a journey that probably was close to 5 years.
It took a while.
Yeah. And I mean, still, but at least I feel like I'm at a place where I can let people in.
Yeah, Kevin, part of the specialness of getting to speak with you is, in knowing you just for a little while that I have, is that there's always been this constant awareness of working.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've heard from you, I'm willing to share my story. I'm pushing myself. You exude this really admirable quality of, I haven't arrived,
right,
but I'm healing.
Thank you.
Every day
Yeah.
takes an effort. I want to really recognize that, if that's okay.
That's great. Thank you.
That I feel like even being here right now, like Rob, I'm willing to share. I want to push myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because believe it or not, to those of you who haven't known you forever,
right,
just getting to know you, I would have never guessed the social awkwardness or the isolation or all of that stuff. And you're so engaging and friendly, but I know on some level, some of that's natural. But as you would say, I think you've really made it a concerted effort to pursue that and grow.
I have. Yeah. So that means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. It's just such a remarkable story. So catch us up. So we have this amazing story. So bring us into the current now. How's your relationship with your folks? It sounds like your relationship with your marriage is really in a state of progress and really providing you with what you need.
Mm-hmm. Funny that we're doing this now. Last night I actually spent like probably close to 4 hours on Ancestry.com building out my family tree. And so I did a DNA.
Both biological and adoptive.
Oh, just biological.
Just biological.
Yeah. And because I just wanted to see where lineage was and ancestors and all that kind of stuff. And so I talked to my biological father and my biological mother on a fairly normal basis. I'd say once a month, fairly. So that's not, by any means a regular cadence, but I'd say we have a healthy, good relationship. So really quick, I met my biological father only about 2 years ago, because for most of from 2015 or so to 2021, I thought that my biological father was a different man who he really was. And so I had this, and again, like I wanted to trust my feelings because I had a feeling that something wasn't right. I had a feeling that my biological father wasn't who I was told he was. So I did a DNA test and found out that was not my father.
But you had known this man who you
I had known this man, and I had established in a relationship with him and all of that. And so ended up doing the DNA test and actually consulted, they're called search angels, and it's just a bunch of people who are really into genealogy and like to help people find their family. So they found my biological father, and then we went out to actually go to a wedding on my adoptive side of a cousin of mine to Bend, Oregon, and we actually met my biological father there. But it was kind of cool seeing him and seeing his charisma, and he's also had a very a hard struggle with substance use as well, but actually has gone to he spent some time at, I believe it's called the Shepherd's House, and it's a place where they go to just recover past addicts. And he's actually now a mentor there, and he works at a restaurant now. And so it's just been really cool being able to have a relationship with him over the phone. I think one time recently I told him on the phone, he said, I've got to go. I've got to go back to work, but it was so good talking to you. And this was probably after we had been talking for a couple of years off and on every other month or every month. And then he kind of paused for a second, and then he said, actually, I don't know why I just lied. I don't have to go, but I was just really uncomfortable.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, Adrian, like, that's okay. Like, I'm uncomfortable too, but like, we're gonna be okay. And I think that was a really beautiful moment, because it kind of like is that realization that like, it's okay to be uncomfortable. And this is like, honestly, pretty freaking wild. And so like, it's just going to be a little bit strange. So
did he know that you existed prior?
So he was actually one of those, if we take it back to the very beginning of my story, he like looked at my eyes when he was at the hospital, and he said, that must not be mine, because I had different colored eyes than him. And so for him, there was that feeling of, I should have chose you, or I should have known, but he didn't. And, that's not his fault by any means. In fact, I think that my biological mother was actually saying, no, he probably isn't yours. And so for him, there was a lot of shame around, I let you go, but that wasn't the case at all.
So let me ask you a question, Kevin, as we head towards the end of this. How is your journey and your search and finding them, how has that impacted your life? And then the other question is for many of our listeners who have adoption stories. There's a lot of people who, for whatever reason, might not have the opportunity, or their story is just, it is what it is, and they're never going to find their parents.
Right.
Maybe speak to both of those things.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
For me, I'd say the biggest thing for me, I truly believe to this day, if I didn't find my biological family, I would still be okay. And that's because I found something other than them to put my identity in. And for me, that was my faith. So that for me was the biggest thing. I really, truly would say, if I didn't find my biological mother and biological father, I would still be able to function as a healthy adult and, be married, because that's a choice I made. And so I think that it's really important to have something other than that to put your identity in, because we all struggle with identity issues, right? It's just a part of being human.
So for a lot of, people listening, and they're never going to get that closure or meet them, you're saying there can be some healing, even though maybe there's not that opportunity for whatever reason. There can be some healing.
Yes. I even think about just the relationships that I've had with friends and family that are aside from my biological family. I've made the choice to seek relationship and seek reconciliation. And so I think that it's really important to, above all else, try and find a way, even though it's probably going to be really hard, because there's shame and there's trauma and there's anxiety and there's depression and all the things that come along with that, to want to seclude, or to want to lash out, or want to be angry forever and be angry at the universe, the people, your parents, whatever. But there's gotta be something that really just takes you to a place of like, okay, I'm going to choose to love, and I'm going to choose to be known, even if that's really, really hard, because it's going to be okay on the other end.
Really hard and really scary.
Yeah.
Kevin, as we share today, please hear my ultimate gratitude. It's such a gift to be able to hear your journey, and I wonder how many people out there have your similar experience. One similar. What is it that you'd like the listeners to really hear?
Yeah, I'd like them to hear that there's hope. I know that there's so many adoptees that are angry and are mad and are isolated, just like I did, and have things in them that they know that they're, capable of, whether it's, being an entrepreneur, or whether it's being, an artist, or whatever it is. And I want them to know that they're loved, they're seen, and that they're experiencing something that's really hard for them, and that that's okay for it to be hard. But you're going to be okay. You've just got to, like I said, I think it's really important to be known, be okay with being known. And that journey of being okay with being known is a long road, but you're going to get there. For parents, one of the most encouraging things for me was when I saw my mom going and getting help too, because I knew that that's modeled and that's okay if I'm not being okay. If I'm not okay because my mom cares about, being supportive and being, okay as well.
So I know you've undergone therapy, and as a therapist myself, I do want to make a little bit push that if you do have an adoption history and that's part of a relinquishment, that, do a little investigation to make sure that if you're seeing a therapist, that they're adoption competent.
That's a great point.
That they really be able to understand, because oftentimes in an effort, even as therapists, we can want you to think your way out of your pain and do all these things. But as you so eloquently put, there's a big emotional piece, and there's some healing that has to happen that's much deeper than just thinking your way out of, because adoption and having that early separation, we call that oftentimes a primal wound, that it impacts us. You can imagine that little going from a fetus to the infant that's separated from a known environment is a trauma.
Totally.
And I love to think about all the trauma little Kevin went through, being separated, being abused, and the way you're working on relationships, and you've got some real relational success in your life.
Yeah.
Kevin, this has been invaluable.
It's been so good. Thank you for your time too.
Well, thank you for sharing, and this has been wonderful. I just want to say thanks to Kevin for sharing his adoptive story. If you have any more questions or like to get any more information, please visit us at our website at embarkph.com. And we look forward to seeing you on our next Roadmap to Joy. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks.